Recently, I did a very funny interview with Vishy Anand's son, and I asked him, who's his favorite chess player? Now, knowing how Vishy's son uses ChessKid, I was sure he was going to say me over his dad. But you know what he said?
Pragg.
Now, who's this kid Pragg? Well, anybody who lives within 100 kilometers of Tamil Nadu knows how good this wonder kid is. And today, we're going to take a look at one of his most recent sparkling games at the World Cup. Pragg was black, and let's see why he is such a fan favorite. Now, white played the move f4. Uh-oh, that move was played without my written permission. And of course, now white can't even castle. But white has checkmate on the brain. Pragg decides to castle into the attack, and then h4 happens. What is white doing? Well, clearly Pragg can take this pawn if he wants to. There are two attackers, and of course, there's only one defender. But white wants that pawn to be captured, because if you could sprinkle some fairy dust and magically remove that pawn from the board, then the rook would be bearing down on h7, and the queen is lined up with h7. She could even swing over to h3, and there could be big problems in little Tamil Nadu. So black decided not to capture the pawn, and Pragg played d5. That's what you're supposed to do. An attack on the side is best answered by an attack in the center. Some very famous people before Funmaster Mike have said that. White continues the attack though and plays h5. We had a quick capture, and then the queen moves over to g3. Now this is the key position. I am guessing that the player playing white figured, hey, Pragg's knight has to go to this very sad square h8, and then maybe white will capture the pawn and white will continue the attack down the g file. But no. Let's go back. Pragg shocked the world, and certainly shocked the white player, by playing knight h4. Now in chess, you never want to give away two minor pieces for the rook, unless you are a borderline 2700 player and you know better. Now this knight clogs up the entire attack. It certainly stops any h-file pressure, so white felt compelled to capture. Now what does black get after losing the knight? Well, black gets access to the first rank, and for a long time in this game, this queen is tied down to the defense of the rook. The queen dives in to g1 with check. Now keep in mind, black is only down one piece, so if black can never recover the piece, then the attack is basically for free. And oh, by the way, black also has an extra pawn in the center. There's no way white's king can walk to the open file. After rook check, the king is already out of squares, and white has to start putting pieces in the way, which are just going to get captured. So if we can go back after queen to g1, white decided to block with the bishop. Now comes the key move. You might be thinking, oh, black needs to check, or black needs to capture, or black needs to make a threat. But instead, e3, the wedge pawn to end all wedge pawns. And look at how this pawn blocks up all of white's ability to move. This bishop can't really go to any sort of natural squares here, and there's a big threat, because if white does nothing, black's going to play queen check. Let me just show you this in a variation. I don't know. Let's just say that white plays f5 or something. We're going to play queen check. White has to take. We're going to take back with check, and because we did all this with check, now we capture the rook, and black is actually up the exchange. We distracted that white queen away. So if we go back to the position after e3, by the way, it should be mentioned that the bishop cannot take here, because again, this queen is overworked, and amazingly, bishop takes h4 seals the deal with a very strange double queen attack, but black is already up the exchange, and black's going to remain up the exchange at least. So we're going to go back again to e3. White needs to guard this square because of the queen check, so white played knight to d1, which was the best attempt. But after the move knight to d1, the attack continues with rook to e8. Black is basically saying, yeah, you can win my super strong wedge pawn whenever you want, but the minute you take that pawn, there's going to be some absolute problems on the e file. And in this position, white has to react, because if white plays some slow move, let's say white plays b3 to fianchetto the bishop or whatever, then we are going to take the rook, and after queen takes, we're going to blow the white house down with pawn to e2. Look at how that pawn never got stopped, and we're probably about to get a second queen with double check. In fact, the computer announces mate in 6. White cannot even survive out of the opening. So we need to go back to this position, and this idea of e2 is such a big deal that white decided he had to move the king to blockade the pawn. And kids, kings do not make good blockaders because they can get checked, and in fact, that's exactly what Pragg does. He plays bishop to e6. He's immediately thinking about targeting that white king. Now white decided to try to stop the check But then Pragg gets his final piece in the game, and the threat is take this knight. Because when your king takes back, then I'll take this bishop, and your king has no squares. You'd have to block with your queen, but remember, the minute your queen starts occupying herself with any other task, you're going to drop an entire rook. So there are huge problems, and you can't even develop this bishop to help the rook defend, because if you do that, you lose control of the d2 square. And after rook to d2, this white king is not going to survive that position either. Let's just pause here and reflect on the genius of Pragg. Look at how all of his pieces are playing some aspect of this game, and none of White's pieces are doing anything but sitting back and watching. White tried this move, knight takes e3, but then we had the very simple bishop f6, threatening the rook. The rook only has one square to save itself. Then we had bishop to f5, which pins this knight, threatens to take this pawn, and trap an entire rook. Remember, black is still only down a piece, so if black can win an entire rook, black will be ahead in material. Now white tried to get the queens off the board so the king would survive, but then maybe the most beautiful move of the entire game. Pragg leaves his queen en prise. It is for free, or is it? Pragg just takes the rook with the amazing idea that if his queen is captured, then one of the most pleasing checkmates in the history of chess would happen. Bishop to g4. Both black rooks and both black's bishops play a part in the checkmate. White did not take the queen. White went on to lose in a less exciting way, but I thought this would be a good way to close the video. So, do you have a new favorite Indian chess player? Vishy's great. Vishy will always be the king, but you might want to put Pragg on your radar.